welcome to Skill-A-Palooza. It's great to have you all here. It's great to have you all here. My name is Kevin. I'm a principal at GSV Ventures.
And I'm Alex. I'm an investor on the team. It's great to see everyone.
We want to first give a big thank you to our sponsor, Ascendium, who made this all possible. Ascendium, where are you? Ascendium, I saw Ascendium here.
Hey,
there he is. There he is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Many of you have asked, what is Skill-A-Palooza? That is a fantastic question. It's the first time we're doing this. We're kicking off Summit with this because we believe in the importance of doing this together. We want to do three things today. We want to envision the future of workforce learning. It's going to be interactive and a time for us to connect. We want to connect, interact, and learn. And three, I guarantee you we're going to have fun today. I guarantee we're going to have fun. What's more fun than discussing the future of workforce learning? Okay? And there's other things I guarantee you will have fun today. But you have to stay till the end. Let's start out with a few questions. We've got an awesome room here. That's part of the magic of Summit, is that we're not just about connecting, we're also about moving industries forward. Who here is a corporate learning and talent leader? Raise your hand. Awesome, awesome. Who here is an entrepreneur? Wow. Who here works for K-12? There's a number of you. It's awesome that you're here. Awesome that you're here. Higher ed? Wow, awesome. Nonprofits? Awesome. Who here is because you got 3 emails from Alex and you got harassed by me to come here?
Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. We're so thrilled you're here because we are in a special moment. K-12 and higher ed have a lot of pressures on them right now with everything happening, and the workforce and corporations are becoming increasingly important pillars of education. Walmart offers free degrees now to 2.3 million employees. Amazon, we learned from one of our friends here, has 352 L&D departments. Talk about important schools. And Visa, at some point, every corporate learning leader has worked at Visa or for Karie Willyerd. But we're also here because there's a lot of challenges that we haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, we're all in this room because obviously L&D, corporate learning is very far from perfect. We've been dealing with issues like incongruency of skills data, low ROI of learning, trying to tie learning to skills or to real business outcomes. Again, all these issues have yet to be solved. They're not new issues, and we're in the room to continue to talk about them. But now you layer on everything that's been going on with AI and the introduction of ChatGPT. And if you think about how are you supposed to formulate a strategy or workforce plan if you don't have a fundamental understanding of the skills within your organization or the skills of tomorrow, right? AI is coming in, and it's fundamentally changing the way we're doing the skills today and the skills of the future, right? So we're here today to talk about a topic, again, that's not new, but is increasingly important today more than ever.
We've got a packed schedule for you today. So to set everyone on the same footing here, I'm going to quickly run through the run of show, and then we're going to have our keynote. We're going to start with an awesome keynote with the Chief Learning Officer of Citi, Cameron Hedrick, who's spent a ton of time preparing for this conversation. Then we want this to be interactive. We're going to have 3 breakout sessions based on the color of your lei, all right, with 3 very innovative and senior learning leaders. We got Karie Willyerd leading one, who is 6-time CLO.
Karie, you want to raise your hand?
Karie Willyerd.
Over there.
The reds and oranges will start. The red and oranges will start with her, okay, because she's wearing red and orange. We got Rebecca Scales, who leads learning at Noom.
Ooh.
The blues and purples will start over with her. And then Rose Sheldon, who's the Chief Learning Officer of KeyBank, will start with her. So we'll organize everyone. There's a lot of people here, so we'll figure out how to manage the breakouts after the keynote, but that's how it's going to work. After the breakout sessions, the learning leaders will come back on stage to share learnings. The breakout sessions will be very much building on top of each other. We've put a lot of thought into how to make sure that it's collaborative and we work together as a team to move the conversation forward. And finally, it wouldn't be Skill-A-Palooza, which is named after Lollapalooza, without a special Skill-A-Palooza musical performance on workforce learning. So you better stick around for that.
You have to stay. It's incredible.
All right, without further ado, I'd love to introduce Cameron Hedrick, the Chief Learning Officer of Citi, to come up.
Hey, man. I am standing. Already killing it with the jokes. Wow, you look amazing. And I'm not grading on a curve for the 8 a.m. Session. Amazing. Thank you for coming. A couple things to get started. Housekeeping items. First, let me tell you about Citigroup because it matters when I get to the last part of this presentation. It's just a big global bank, a couple 100,000 people, 100 countries, consumer lines, institutional lines. So there's some complexity imbued in that. And I must say that the opinions that I share today are my own. They don't necessarily represent that of the firm. Check. I also have to thank my collaborators for this material, Rachel Biggio and Peter Fox. Thank you. To the extent any of this lands, that's on them and not on me. Now then, I want to take a little poll because I understand that you had the opportunity to go see Elmo, that Elmo is actually making an appearance in another session. So you must have been compelled to come here for some reason. And I hope that that reason is that you want to learn a ton more about skills. But I want to get a sense of the audience. So I'm going to do a scale of 1 to 10. I need you to plot yourself on the scale. 1 is, I don't even know what skill means. I looked that up on the way over here. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. And 10 would be, dude, I'm writing the code that obviates the need for this entire discussion, right? Right? I've thought about this for 20 years, and you don't know what you're talking about. So 1 to 3s, raise your hand. Good. Be brave. That's good. You're curious. That's good. No, thank you. That's good. You're the only ones that are going to think this is compelling. 4 to 7s. Okay. All right. And 8 to 10s. Oh, jeez. The 8 to 10s. I need you to keep all of your criticism and questions for the expert panel at the end. Okay. Skills portfolio management. Let's jump in. Obviously, we think that this is a key idea, something compelling that we need to think about for the future of L&D. Skills portfolio management. Let me just unpack that for just a second. Let's think about the word portfolio. Typically, like a real estate portfolio or a stock portfolio or a stamp collection. Normally has 4 characteristics at least. You can find it or acquire the asset. You can develop the asset in some way. You can value the asset in some way, and you can move it around. You can trade it. There's some fungibility. So with that as a backdrop, the simple thesis is this would be a good thing to do for a skill, a knowledge, attributes, because it is the lifeblood of a knowledge-driven, and in fact, all institutions. So if that thesis doesn't resonate with you, I don't know how the rest of this is going to go, but that is the basis upon which this is built. And if you follow that logic, you would rightly be thinking as a CEO or a CLO or a head of HR or just a general manager, if I'm talking to my board or my senior stakeholders about the quality of my skill portfolio, what would that look like? What might we present? How might we present it? What strategic value and competitive advantage might that give us? That is the inspiration for the talk today. And we wanted to say, look, if we thought about those questions 3-5 years out, what are some of the possibilities that will show themselves? We didn't want to do 2050 or some long-dated date range because then it gets a little bit too abstract. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is achievable today, may not be easy, or we think it'll be achievable on a relatively short time horizon. And when you walk away from the session today, we just have a few simple things we hope you walk with. 1, some conceptualization of what this idea means, portfolio of skill management, a realistic view of the benefits and challenges, a better grip on the building blocks needed to actually depict the use cases that we'll put forward. And if you don't have a sense of audacity and intestinal fortitude already, then you're going to need it. Because if you try to do this, it is rough. It is rough. I'm a very practical practitioner, a pragmatic, a realist. I will not sugarcoat anything. Here's how I think you're going to experience this. The 1 to 5s are going to think the first couple of sections are awesome. You're going to be spinning with possibilities. And the 6 to 10s are going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's living in some fairy tale land. But then the back end, everything flips. And we'll talk about the challenges of actually doing this in flight. Oof, not easy, but worth doing. So the agenda is simple. We'll spend 5 minutes in grounding, a good bit of our time in this hypothetical sort of future state, key stakeholders review, and then finally the necessary conditions to make this happen. Grounding. Now, I think this is good for all of us, not just maybe the uninitiated. Humans are amazing creatures, aren't they? I mean, we're a total mess. Total mess. And magic at the same time. We're composed of all kinds of things, and those all kinds of things are constantly on the move, and they change given the conditions in which we reside. Among the many magical elements, we do have skills, right? The things we know, the things that we can do, knowledge, the things we know, attributes, abilities. You've heard this SKA thing. It's kind of tired, but it's helpful to frame this discussion. So the idea here is simply if you have that and you can X-ray it, right? You could X-ray an individual and codify the presence of a skill, a knowledge, an attribute, and depict the quality of it. That complexity is material. There would be some value in that. And if you can do it for one person, you could hypothetically do it for two. And this idea of portfolio starts to come into view. And if you can do it for two people, you could hypothetically do it for many people. And then you can sort of boundary condition your demographic however you want. To say, maybe I want to look at my skill portfolio for a division, for a geography, for a level, and so on and so forth. Going forward, I'll start to just use the word skill for two reasons. One, it's a useful little shorthand, and two, of the lot, it's the easier one to see and assess. Knowledge and abilities and sort of how people move in flight, in motion, get complicated, and we'll talk about that at the very end. So now that you have that little piece of grounding, there's only one more piece of grounding that I'll put forth, and that is this idea of role when I talk about a role. If you think role and job description, you're 95% of the way there. All a role is a codification of skill, knowledge, attribute, portfolio. You hope one human can embody to create value, to actually put that into motion to create some value. And sometimes that's one role, sometimes it's a multi-incumbent role where you have many, many people doing the same role. The concept works just the same. That's it. That's the grounding bit. We're well ahead of schedule, so now we can just relax into the last two sections. So let me take you into the future a little bit. So kind of put yourself here. You have to present to your senior stakeholders some version of skill portfolio state of the union. How's it going? What is this current skill map? Maybe I'm going to show them that. We'll show you an idea of what that looks like. Maybe we see an emerging skill on the horizon and we want to know the degree to which we have it today. That'd be good. Then we're going to look at role conversions. We know that roles are dying and roles are coming on. How might we attack that problem? And then there's this other thing, like a resting state of conscious competence, which is a really kind of an interesting thing to think about. And I'll tell you what that means a little bit when we get there. So imagine that you are our senior stakeholders, and here we go. Let's take this first use case. We want to have a look at the state of skills in any given population inside our company. So let me tell you how to read this map. This was inspired by the Smart Money Market Map. I think that thing is defunct, which is heartbreaking. But the basic idea here is if you sort of, imagine you're flying a plane, right, over the landscape, and you see farmlands, big patches of different things. This is your high altitude view of the unit of measure that you have selected. So in this particular example, I've chosen the U.S. Consumer Bank. You can fill in the gaps for yourself, like what might that unit of measure be for you? And you can see in this skill map, the size of the box depicts the degree to which that skill is present. Roughly how much of it do you have? The color depicts the quality of that skill. And then sometimes you'll see some gray boxes in here. So that would be like our slow signal strength. You got some of this out here in your portfolio, but we haven't been able to validate it. We don't really know the quality of that particular skill. Yeah. Now what would you do if this was your actual skill map? Here's just a couple things we can infer right away. Well, let's start with the good news. Retail bank products, we have a good amount of knowledge, and it's green. Sales model, that's good. You'd want that. But oh my goodness, look at our risk management box. Yeah, we got a lot of it, but the quality sucks. And you can think of all the downstream implications of this in the context of a bank. I mean, maybe there's some recent, I don't know. You might want to think through that. Did anybody have money in SVB? No, don't raise your hand. So, bring this guy a kerchief. So you can understand, just let your imagination run wild with the possibility of having something like this. Even if the data isn't that great, at least it gives you a place to hunt. You can be a little more surgical, a little more precise. Now let's use this same we're flying over thing, high altitude, to do a different use case. This idea of there's a high demand skill. Later on, I'm going to introduce this idea of a skills portfolio management office, which doesn't really exist anywhere that I've been able to find, but it's a necessary condition for all this to take shape. We'll talk about that in a minute. But your skills management office tells you there's an emerging programming skill called Julia, coming on fast, man. And they understand that strategically it's important to your company. So they very naturally go and maybe click on the IT department breakout view to see the extent to which this thing, Julia, exists. So you click on it, and boom, just to the right here, you see, here's my skill map. It's a good thing you got a lot of systems engineering, then it's green. You'd hope to see that. Python, of course. And sure enough, there is Julia. It appears. Small amount, unvalidated. And just with this data alone, you can begin to think, well, what am I going to do about this? Am I going to buy it with humans? Am I going to buy more of it with machines? Am I going to develop it in my own shop? How am I going to go after this? You'll also notice a couple little stars here. I didn't put this on the first slide because I wanted to save it for the second. And we started to do this, actually. You can value the skill in at least two dimensions. You can value the skill premium for a specific role. Like if this particular skill is added to a role, how much more does that demand in the marketplace? And you can therefore also infer what the cost of adding X amount of that skill is in your portfolio. So there's a financial dimension here that is, actually it's not that hard to get at, although it's right now it's a kind of more art than science, but it's certainly there and you can get a directional indication of that. So we've done two use cases, high, flying, looking down, having a look at the skills map. Now we're going to switch gears. Now we're going to think about roles. We're going to think about roles. So remember, a role is just a codification of skills, knowledge, and attributes in one person or for multi-incumbent roles. And you know, and you've seen this already, there are role types that are declining. They're becoming less important because they're not relevant and or machines can take them over. You know, wagon wheel manufacturing, buggy whip makers, or really a more recent version, anything that requires a lot of manual paper pushing like mortgage processing, those things are just sort of going away. And that's a good thing. But people regenerate and things regenerate. And we want to take advantage of that. This is where this gets a little audacious here. So before you have an emotional reaction, just wait till I get to the end of the slide and I'll do all the necessary disclaimers. If we know A, B, and C, 1,273 people occupy those roles, declining roles. And we also know that there's a new emerging role type. We'll just call it emerging role type D. Prompt engineer. How's it going, huh? Well, how many of those 1,273 people might be fit for purpose for the new emerging role type D? So the first thing I would do if I had a magic machine, I would ask it for this first attribute profile. Of the 1,273 role occupants of the declining roles, we know that emerging role type D requires a couple of specific attributes. I would query the 1,273 to find those attributes, because in my view, attributes are more durable than skill acquisition, so I want to look at that first. That narrows my population to 812. Then I'll run another filter for the actual presence of some skills that might be transferable. Now we're down to 476. Then I want to know from that group who's indicated a motivation to move. This is for our talent friends. because we know that if you have indicated a motivation to move, you're probably going to be more successful in the role. And then I want to run a magic equation that tells me what the success probability 1 year hence is of those 319, and that pops out 217 people. For my HR and legal and employee relations friends, there must not be anyone in here because that would have gotten a laugh. A lot of problems with this. Algo bias. This gets kind of scary. People don't trust this. So what I'm not saying is that only the 217 should have access to emerging role type D. Of course not. All I'm saying here is that it gives us a sense of our embedded resource that we might have a chance of converting. That's it. And it's funny, this particular last one, success probability at 1 year, I haven't found many people in the middle on this one. I talk to folks, and these are like the leading people in the world on this stuff, and they'll either say, that is crazy, get that out of your presentation, it's silly, it's never going to happen. And other people just go, oh yeah, we're working on that now. We almost got that one whipped. Well, I don't know what the truth is. Some of you can actually tell me. All right, so those are our third use case. We're going to finish this little section with one more use case, this resting state of conscious competence, and then we'll move into the practical reality of getting this through. Now, I just have to say, if you're not impressed with me thus far, okay, and you're probably not, but you're about to see an unbelievable achievement that I've never done in public, which is to overcome my imposter syndrome and try to explain this to you when the founder and architect of this thing is sitting right in front of you. So please give me grace and mercy, and you can come up later and tell me what I did wrong. This idea of resting state of conscious competence. Let me explain this to you because I have not seen this discussed anywhere else, and I just think it's fun. So here we go. There's a few ways to get at this idea of what is your sort of state of conscious competence in your organization. At least get a sense of how it feels. Up to this point, we've been very high level. Right now, I want to get down to the granular level, the blade of grass, learning objective view of how fit you might be at a specific learning objective level. But how you get at this data, you have to understand at least a little tiny bit of it. So at Citi, we use an adaptive learning platform called Area 9, and Ulrich, all kidding aside, is here. This is his company. And as the learner moves through that learning event, they not only answer the prompts like we've all been used to, they also indicate their degree of confidence in the answer. So as you can see here, so they might say the answer is B, and then they say, I know it, I think I know it, I'm not sure I know it, and I have no idea. So just sit in that for a minute. Very different experience. Now in the back end, right, the machine, like it knows the rightness or wrongness of the answer, juxtaposes that against the level of confidence, time vectors, other cool things, some black box things that we don't know about. And what it does is, for the learner, is that it customizes a path through the material, a more efficient path, because it'll over-index on the things that they don't know and under-index on the things that they do. But the benefits go well beyond that. Now, and I should finish with this. When the learner exits that event, they exit at a state of conscious competence, okay? Threshold level conscious competence, so that's good. But there's a lot of interesting data that come up during the rollout period. Let's call it a 30-day rollout period. And as a percentage of responses, you can look at your group in the 4 levels of competence. Competence. How many? What percentage of the responses are consciously competent, consciously incompetent, or incompetent? Unconscious incompetent, so on and so forth. It's a tongue twister. Most of you are familiar with this model. So with that as a concept, it stands to reason that if you're investing heavily in a certain learning objective that you want to play through, you'd want to see how this is moving through your organization. I'll give you a specific example. Let's say we're taking a psych safety bet, right? We really think that the presence of psychological safety in our organizations creates great things. And we don't have time to dig into all that, but that is actually how I feel, and it's important. And then at the learning objective level, at minimum, you would want your population to be able to define psychological safety, to identify the conditions necessary to create high and sustainable levels of it, and so on and so forth. And when you start down this road, at the end of the deployment, you can look back on the rollout period and see that your state of conscious competence, year one, resting state, beginning state, was pretty low. And then you farm into your place more and more of this. Yes, the population changes, and maybe you do a second rollout 6 months hence or a year later, and you can take the temperature and see that the resting state of conscious competence now in this example goes up. And that gives you some level of confidence that this is starting to get through. So that's it. So blade of grass, high level. You can just see there's 10 other examples we could have given. We just wanted to spark your thinking as to the art of the possible. Now, in the last 10 minutes, we need to talk about the realities of this whole idea, because it's really cool to just talk about. Really fun to write a cool paper about. Very hard to do this in real life. There are at least 3 conditions or 3 categorical conditions that you have to understand. There's a mindset and culture dimension. And I have to say, I thought this one would be the easiest one. It's not. It's the hardest one. It's not tech, come to find out. Organizational structure. Whew. Not built for this. And technology. Let's not diminish it. But when I started down this path, I really thought the tech piece would be the worst. But I think it's the org structure and the mindset. So let's do good. I'm seeing head shakes. So the practitioners in the groups, that's good. Thank you. I needed some spiritual energy, encouragement. Whew. That's good. Mindset and culture. Whew. Here we go. Here's the first one. Just getting the concept through is a big deal. Because forever, the human has been the primary organizing factor in the context of workforce planning and workforce management. How many humans do we need, with what skill, where, and when? But the first question is typically, how many humans do we need? Versus, what skills do we need, where, and when? It changes everything when you ask that question first. And this is to not demonize the human first. That humans are the ones that imbue this stuff. They put it in motion. They create value, right? Just because you know something doesn't mean you do it. But it resides in us. But that barrier is about to break down. It has broken down. Because now the question is not only, the reason the skill question first is the better one, is that certainly humans are going to be a part of it, but machines are also a part of it, as either a replacement or some kind of an augmentation to the human. So you miss that, you're going to miss all kinds of other competitive advantage. So again, just selling the concept, like the skill as the primary organizing mechanism, woo, rough. Next, you got to have some kind of an organizational construct that makes this thing come to life. So this idea of an Office of Skills Management is something to consider. I mean, who in your organization right now would be thinking about what does the taxonomy should look like? What is that thing? How do I know what emerging skills are coming? How can I routinize that? How do I know what skills are dying? How do I routinize that? How do I know what skills are ripe for machine augmentation or takeover? How do I know that? Skill profile generation. So here's another concept, right? For any role, multi-incumbent role or otherwise, you might want to have a gold standard skill profile. And you can query your state of capability against. Well, who's generating that? How do you generate it? Where does it reside? Assessment methodology. If you talk to people, and they're talking about putting this in motion in their company, and you want to check the vulnerability of their thinking, go here first. What is your assessment methodology to codify the quality of that skill? Because this is where the vulnerabilities will show themselves early, and I'll show you why in a minute. Data analytics and insight. And of course, all of this has to exist inside of your existing workforce planning, learning, talent acquisition, talent model. Eventually, I think it'll kind of wrap itself around it all. But at this point, it's a new feature, and it doesn't even know where to live yet. Am I a learning thing? Am I a talent thing? Am I a recruiting thing? Yes, yes, yes. And that's why it's so hard to locate this thing. intestinal fortitude, audacity. You feeling it? If not, let's talk more. Data quality, just the collection methodology, the inference engines. How do you derive these skill profiles? Is it all inferred? Inferred plus human? What's the loop? LLM, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of ways to go at this. Visualization tools, you've already sort of figured that out. That's a big one. But again, the version of tech and data that's really fascinating, this is the other big obstacle, just amounts to trust. The bias, the privacy, the transparency. Outside of the mindset shift that I mentioned earlier is the primary roadblock that I've experienced. Here's the second biggest one. The trust in what you're going to do with my skills data. I'm shocked by this. Because in my mind, and this shows my naivete, I was like, well, what do you mean, what are we going to do with it? It's a development thing. We would never do anything negative with this. But they're thinking, well, you might. Are you going to use it to rate me? You're going to use it to comp me? You're going to use it to fire me? You're going to use it to promote me? And the level of suspicion, maybe it's just my company, but I would guess no. I would guess this is more pervasive. Trust. Here's a big one. Platform interoperability. Goodness. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. I can tell who you are by what you laugh at. We use Workday as our HCM. All right? Sometimes that gets a laugh. No, it's fine. But just right out of the gate, that's a constraining force. What is your HCM? But this is just a little sampling of the things that we have. Learning development platforms, LXPs, AI talent platforms, HCM, data visualization tool, LMS. All these things have to somehow talk to each other to make this come true. Very difficult to do. Now let's say you have all that whipped. If anybody's whipped this one, this is a fun one. What is your assessment methodology? This has been maybe the third greatest challenge. So let's say you've perfectly inferred a skill set. Now, how do you judge the quality? Maybe you do it all through inference. Maybe it's all passive. But if you start to involve other factors in, be it just a self-assessment, well, that's good. That's fairly easy to do. Data quality, not so good, but it's okay. Layer atop of a manager assessment, cool. Peer assessment, maybe, technical test, third-party observation, inference, cross-referencing, all good and fine. But you have to pick, because each one of those phases, while it might give you more fidelity in your data, it also introduces new complexities and tons of cost. Deciding what your Likert scale is going to be, massive. I had a huge debate with my people. Is it a binary scale, got it, don't got it? Or is it some gradation? And is the gradation 5 points or 8 points? Let's say we all agree on 8 points. That's good. Now here's another fun one. You're going to behaviorally anchor it, or are you just going to make it generic? Because if you do behavioral anchoring for every skill type, hang on, man. I haven't seen that done, And by that, for those of you that don't know, so like, for example, if you're choosing employee relations skill set, right, and you want to actually anchor it to 8 points, and maybe one would be, I have a general knowledge of employee relations. And then as you progressively move, it specifically says, it builds it up for you. American law, UK law, boom, boom, boom. Versus a generic, which is a 1 would be, I don't really have any idea about it. And then a 10 or an 8 would be, I could write the book on it, which is how Degreed does it. That's one of the ways they've done it. It's just a very generic. But if you want to anchor it, it's a whole other thing. And then platform compatibility. Very difficult to nail this stuff. I'm going to end with this. Generative AI. AGI. But let's stick with the more recent stuff. I started to become aware of this around version 3, 3.5. Version 4 has just woken me up. I don't know how much time you spend interacting with GPT-4. But it is something. I'm not saying it's a panacea. I'm just saying it's something different. I wish we had more time to talk about that. But to sort of be blind to the fact that this capability is not going to materially impact, and not just large language models, but just tech in general and everything that's happening in this field and everything that's may sum to some version of AGI is notable. So a lot has been written about this, just even in the last 6 months in the learning space. I'm not going to go back through all that, but let me just ground you on a few elements. So personalization and contextual awareness of the machine and its interaction is certainly there. That's one certain outcome that we're already starting to see peep through. Content development, again, lots been written about this, a lot of good articles about this. But yes, this is your first draft writing, sure. And then the human can perfect it. That's a whole nother discussion. But yes, I've got to move on for sake of time. Here's another fun one. You know, if you haven't cross-pollinated this whole deep fake idea with conversational and real-time data log data with chat in the background, that's an easy one. Right? Virtual coaches that look like whatever you want them to look like. Virtual facilitators. Easy, relatively, over the next, well, I've already seen prototypes of this. Inference quality, this is a good one for us for this particular topic. Sure, that should go up. Presence and quality therein. I'll leave you with two things in my last 42 seconds. This is a good segue into, I know, right? I'm going to stick in the landing. Damn it. Two kind of fun things that we'll end with. One is, in my fairy tale land, I'm intrigued with this idea of propensity to act. This knowing-doing gap. Very well-meaning people that I work with, they go, well, you know, just train it, and everything will be fine. And underneath that statement is like, if a person knows, a person does. I know a lot of things, and I don't do them. Right? In theory, I know how to be an Olympic athlete, and clearly I don't do it. Why? For all kinds of reasons. If you're an OD kind of person, inside the corporate context, you know some of the answers. If your systems, capital S systems, aren't tuned to the behavioral outcomes you want, it doesn't matter how much you train, you're creating other roadblocks for yourself. So in my future world, some kind of an aid to analyze all the internal blocks would certainly be there, and the internal to your company, and then inside the human blocks to propensity to act would be there. Because imagine a world where I could show you the skills map and also say, inside this universe, the propensity to act is X, because it gives you a better sense of what actually might flow through into actual action and therefore value for your client. And then here's the other one. This is a real killer. I mean, this would be fun if it could do. This idea of alchemy, of connections. Here's what I mean by this. You'll remember in the grounding section, I had two of those little humanoids next to each other. This person plus this person equals a certain skill, knowledge, and attribute profile. Good and fine. But there's some magic in the human. That when you get together, the 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 3. You're more than the sum of your two parts. And I can imagine a world where if I can look at my skill map, and I can look at it at sort of an atomical level, and if I could somehow factor in the alchemy too, that this thing plus this thing equals a brand new thing that doesn't necessarily exist in any one person, mind blower. Huge. Crazy, maybe, but fun to think about. So that's really it for the deck. You guys have been a really amazing audience, and I appreciate it. And we're going to experiment with this alchemy of connections with our breakout groups to see 1 + 1 equal way more than 2. So with that, thank you again for your time. And I guess, Alex, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you.
If everyone can just find a seat, we're going to quickly go over all the amazing discussions that were just had in a very, very quick discussion. And then you have to stay. Again, I promise you the musical performance will be worth it. You'll be happy you stayed. But yeah, if everyone could just find a seat, this will be quick, and then we'll let you out for the rest of the summit. All right. You guys good?
I think we are good. Can you hear that? Yep. Excellent. Okay, we're going to do this really, really quickly. That energy was amazing. Thank you, everyone. We should be done in less than 10 minutes here. If I can just ask each of the great facilitators, I'm going to start with you, Rose, to summarize the key discussions that you had at each of your boards. So you go first.
Sure. So we all work together to figure out how would we prioritize. What are the things that in order to execute on a skill strategy within a company, what are the things that we need to focus on? So we came up with lots of ideas, grouped those together into major themes. And then the last step was we went through a prioritization matrix in the back. And so what we found was the low-hanging fruit actually, I don't even remember what my low-hanging fruit was now. What's my lower left-hand corner there? That one, where you had your hand. Oh, that's right. So the things that we said to hit first are really obvious, and they are quick wins. It's make sure your learning and development teams are organized around skills. How can you prioritize skills if you're not organized to execute on them? And then the other piece was make sure you're maximizing the technology tools you already have. The number of organizations that go after strategies like this that aren't using all the functionality that already exists within their learning management system to provide people access to the content is crazy. We also had the upper left-hand corner, which is, this isn't worth spending your time on. Holler that one out for us. Right, who owns the skills? I have spent more time in the past 7 years in meetings with HR people and department heads who want to argue who owns the skills, and we never find the answer. So you'll find I have a list of things that I say just move on. Defining the difference between skills, competencies, and capabilities, for example, I will not participate in that conversation. It's just not worth it.
100%.
So, and then we have a bunch of other ones in the upper right, but those are the low-hanging fruit. Make sure you've got your team organized, and make sure you're maximizing the tools already at your disposal.
Okay, all right. Well, we talked more fundamentally about why aren't we doing more with skills. We've been talking about skills for decades in K-12 education. We know what things work in K-12 and what doesn't. A lot doesn't. But we know what works. And in corporate, we've been talking about it for well over a decade. And we're not a lot further along. I mean, you have your pockets, right? You have your pockets like Citi and others that are doing some amazing things with some of the newest technologies out there. But then the question becomes, why not? Why aren't we further along? And what we came up with basically is there's a lot of, first of all, ownership of skills was a big one. Like, who owns this? Who is supposed to do this? So my answer on that one was, if you have your L&D teams out in the business and not totally centralized or somehow like making those connections, it really makes a big difference. But there's a lot of skepticism from the your upper level leadership as well as with the employees. Like our speaker said, right? There's a lot of people don't trust us with their skills. So they don't want us to connect it to performance. That's another thing. When you start connecting these skills to performance, it becomes a different issue. It's no longer a learning issue anymore. And so keeping those separate becomes a really important thing, right? HR folks, seem to always want to put skills and performance together. And I keep fighting against that personally. Some other things that we talked about too was just that there's an infinite number of changing skills as well. Like, it's constantly changing, so how do you keep up with it? So trying to figure out those skills, we need our good consultants out there doing all of the research for us. We need to keep up with that stuff to know what's coming, right? But in companies, it's really, really difficult. And then also, how even to figure out the skills gaps. Now, I know Area 9 is here. I'm a big fan of Area 9 in figuring out where skills gaps are and so forth. There are a couple of other companies doing this, but we literally need more companies working on this particular issue, especially when you break down the skills into levels of skills. You don't just have a skill that you teach, you gotta know what level people are so that you know how to level them up, right? And that's the trouble with it. So really interesting conversations, thank you all. This has really been great. So,
I think that, yeah, this is active. So I had the generative AI topic, which of course is a big one, and everybody had, so we kind of aimed more towards what are the things that we think present the opportunities, what's the biggest opportunities, and what are some of our biggest concerns. And so obviously one of the first ones and the easiest, if we were gonna have put it in a matrix, would have been low-hanging fruit is make the process of skill building more efficient. So, and that might include, we get to eliminate doing knowledge-based learning production because that's gonna be so easy for an individual to self-assemble. A second big category was, and I really liked this thought from someone in the group back here about how we could use coaching and AI as our non-judgmental, skilled colleague. which I thought was a very interesting way to think of it. And that might actually reveal more incompetence, because you're afraid to say I'm incompetent in something, but if it's just a prompt on a screen, you might be more willing to admit your incompetence, and so therefore will move up the scale efficiently on skill building, because people will trust, if they trust their colleague. And then the third big one was skills inference. So instead of having to do self-assessment or some sort of programmatic assessment, will we skip that generation to skills inference and be able to dynamically build teams, for example, based on skill inferences from the data that sits in the organization? Which leads to what somebody else said, the side which is, what are we most concerned about? And they said, all this stuff on the left is going to happen anyways. So maybe what we should be focusing on is the stuff on the right. And that includes, big concerns about trust. So if we think we have trust issues now, wait until we have, trust issues with what people are using the information in generative AI to do. And trust that's based on valid concerns like hallucinations. So has it inferred a skill I don't have? Like my bio reads that I graduated from Berkeley, and I've never stepped foot on the campus of Berkeley when I asked ChatGPT to write my bio. So, what inferences can it make that, that don't make sense? And kind of back to Cameron's point about culture being the hardest thing to go tackle, I think that'll be one of the hardest things to go tackle.
For sure. I just have to say, the only reason I'm saying this is to react to your point. I'm the CLO and the head of performance management for the firm. Mm-hmm. Those of you that grew up in the 70s, you remember that commercial goes, I'm not only the hair club president, I'm the hair club member. Now I can see I'm aging out here. The reason I bring it up at all is that I'm both, and I would just say to your point, do not cross-pollinate performance ratings and that type of thing with your skills strategy. It will be the death knell of your approach. So there you go.
That's terrific. Listen, thank you everyone. We did that in 8 minutes as well, so I went ahead of time, so thanks to all the speakers. And I'll pass back over to Alex to introduce the last step.
All right. Oh my God. Can we get another round of applause for these amazing facilitators? I know it was a chaotic room, right? You guys had so much energy. It might have been hard to hear some sessions, but these facilitators crushed it. Cameron was amazing. Peter was amazing. So thank you all. It was great. Last but not least, we will have Ike come up and give a special music performance. Come on, Ike. I don't know what else I'm missing.
Let's do it. Yeah. Mike sounds good. Make some noise for Cam Hedrick. I don't know about you guys, but I really loved his talk today. As a sales leader, I'm definitely living with a bunch of ideas. I was thinking about our sales competency model and how we can really flesh out these skills and monitor them. So thank you so much. I definitely personally took a lot out from this. So DJ, if you want to start the music, I know we'll go ahead and get started. If everybody can stand up, push your chair in, the session's over, we're going to vibe out. Don't worry, nobody's going to judge your dance moves. I promise. My name is Ike Ramos. I'm a former teacher, principal, hip-hop artist, also currently a regional vice president of sales at Renaissance, Nearpod, and Flocabulary. And we're going to be covering a lot of themes throughout the conference. And, I think it's important that we have the right energy, the right mindset to collaborate, to learn from each other, to build these relationships, to drive the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. So again, don't be shy. I need you guys to dance with me. Welcome to ASU+GSV Premier Global Event for Technology, Innovation in Skills and Education, addressing key challenges we're facing in workforce learning across any industry, like skills-based hiring and mobility, addressing retention. That would be a victory, preparing employees for the 21st century. These are the issues that bind us, whether educator, investor, or provider. Shout out Cam Hedrick for the quote. That's a keynote from the Keynote. So much to discuss in this space, like DEI in the workplace. One thing that I'ma stay fly, supercharge my learning with AI.
No days off like Ferris Bueller.
We get to work, Skill-A-Palooza. Hands up, side to side like this. Hey, I never thought I'd say Skill-A-Palooza in a rap, but I get to today. Hey, we get to work, Skill-A-Palooza. Leading the march like Martin Luther. Workforce learning is the future. Listen, so many themes, can you follow me? Like unifying skills taxonomy and preparing for jobs that don't exist. Tapping into new talent pools to assist. Or how to navigate your L&D. Under economic uncertainty, scaling learning opportunities with urgency, focusing on mental health most certainly. Thankfully, we got the best and the brightest to learn from while they sitting right beside us. I know I'ma leave a smarter person after listening to Josh Burson. So lean in like Cheryl and collaborate. Learn from others like Citi who do it great. There are things that are new to you, new to me. We can learn through course era or you to me. So break a leg, maybe try JEG. Degree go one to Guild instead. A LinkedIn, let it sink in. Gotta keep learning to make Franklins and Lincolns. And no days off, hands up. Just like we this. Get to work, Skill-A-Palooza. Leading the march like Martin Luther. Workforce learning is the future. No days off like Ferris Bueller. We get to work, Skill-A-Palooza. Leading the march like Martin Luther. Workforce learning is the future. When I say Skilla, you say Palooza. Skilla. When I say Skilla, you say Palooza. Skilla. Oh, thank you guys so much. One more time, make some noise for Cam Hedrick. Did a phenomenal job. Again, I know I'm leaving with a lot of key takeaways. Thank you. And yeah, let's keep this energy throughout the conference. It's literally like it's a once a year, once in a lifetime opportunity. Those of you who have been coming, this is my third one. This is literally the best and the brightest minds together. Take advantage of that opportunity, learn from each other, and then come hang out with me again on Wednesday at 2:10 in this same room. Me and my incredible Chief Product Officer at Renaissance, Todd Breckus, will be hosting the talk here as well. So thank you guys so much. And make some noise for my man, Kevin Zhang. He kept me on track throughout this whole process.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Hope that was valuable. I know it was a little chaotic. The energy surpassed what we expected, to be honest. Thank you. I hope it's a wonderful summit, a ton of learning for everyone, and we'll see you next year. All right.